Our perception of the world seems so natural, we just take it for granted. You wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, and a world just appears.
For most of us, most of the time, perception feels passive, as though the world simply flowed into our minds through the windows of our eyes. Based on this intuition, we might assume that the brain works something like this. A sensory stimulus arrives, travels up through a few layers of processing, and gets spit out at the end as the world we perceive. But there are problems with this view. For one thing, the data we get from our senses are far too sparse to account for the vivid world we experience. For another, we're subject to all sorts of strange illusions, suggesting that our minds play a much more active role in perception.
What color do you see?
This is very obviously white and gold.
I don't get the gold and white.
I don't get the blue and black. When you can't believe your eyes, what can you believe?
Motivated by examples like this, neuroscientists have long thought about perception as a kind of inference, a statistical best guess based on the data we perceive.
Starting with this idea that the brain is locked inside this bony vault of the skull, trying to figure out what's out there in the world. Really what it's trying to do is infer the most likely cause of these sensory signals, given what they are, and given its prior expectations or beliefs about what's going on. This is a classic expression of what in mathematics is called Bayesian inference.
The mathematically optimal way to do this kind of inference comes from the Reverend Thomas Bayes, a 16th century statistician and philosopher. Bayes discovered a simple formula to describe how to update our beliefs, or priors, based on new evidence.
The idea of Bayes' theorem is it's a way of taking what you know now and updating it to what you should believe next, given some new data.
Neuroscientists have developed this into something called the Bayesian brain hypothesis. The idea that the brain uses something like Bayes' theorem to update its beliefs based on sensory evidence. There's just one problem. Calculating Bayes' theorem exactly would require us to consider every possible cause of every sensation. We'd be paralyzed by even the smallest update. Here, again, we encounter the limits of our finitude.
The fact of our finitude is, again, no academic issue. It's central to the nature of our being, and we're forced to deal with it on an ongoing basis.
To solve this problem, evolution devised an ingenious workaround that allows us to approximate Bayesian inference in a much more efficient way. Here's how it works. Instead of starting with the data of our senses and building to a guess about what's out there in the world, we actually start with a prediction of what's out there and a model of what we would perceive if that prediction were correct.
So that's called the generative model. It's a kind of a simulation of what I would be seeing if it were in fact my best guess.
These are called top-down predictions because they come from the inside out rather than the outside in.
We don't passively perceive our worlds, we actively generate them.
At each level of the perceptual hierarchy, we compare these top-down predictions with the sensory data coming from the bottom up. Then the discrepancy or error signal is used to update subsequent predictions. After the first layer, only the error signal gets passed up the chain, allowing the brain to save precious energetic resources.
The fundamental idea is that you can approximate Bayesian inference by the brain continually generating predictions about the causes of the information that it gets, and then using sensory data to update these predictions. The sensory data here is treated as a prediction error. It's the difference between what the brain expects and what it gets.
This theory is called predictive processing, and it's gaining increasing currency in neuroscience. But the strange implication of this view is that the ordinary world we perceive is far closer to a psychedelic experience than we tend to imagine.
What I am perceiving is in fact my internal simulation, my internal model, but constrained so that it is as close as possible to the few bits of sensory data that I actually get.
The term I like to use for this is that perception is a kind of controlled hallucination.
If you think of the functional organization of the brain as a kind of internal government, then the effect of psychedelics could be compared to a kind of anarchy, collapsing hierarchies and liberating repressed information. Robin Carhart Harris explores this analogy explicitly in a paper titled Rebus and the Anarchic Brain.
the so-called rebus model, which is relaxed beliefs under psychedelics.
The paper focuses on something called precision weighting, a parameter in the predictive processing model that determines which signals get more priority in the meeting of top-down and bottom-up information. You can think of it like certainty or confidence. The more confidence you have in a prior, the more resistant it is to updating. Conversely, the more confidence you have in sensory information, the more power it has to update high-level priors.
The idea with rebus is that under psychedelics, the precision weighting of our internal models, these two things in a handshake, models, assumptions, beliefs, hypotheses versus data, the precision of the models will dial down.
According to the rebus theory, psychedelics work by relaxing the precision or confidence in high-level prior beliefs. This liberates bottom-up information flow, allowing us to perceive the world and our own minds more freshly.
We can go around the world without our usual preconceptions. For example, if we're a depressed person, one of our top-level priors might be, I'm a useless person and everything always goes wrong. And when that prior is quietened under psychedelics, you might go around and see, wow, the world's a kind of a pretty amazing place.
Unlike most psychiatric medications, psychedelics appear to be effective across a wide variety of mental illnesses.
Depression, anxiety, addiction, and OCD have all shown susceptibility to psychedelic treatment. One way of understanding this is through the entropic brain hypothesis. Many different mental illnesses can be thought of as ailments of excessive order. Instead of adversity loosening our beliefs, it leads us to cling to them defensively.
Stuff happens and we're hurt by it, we're injured and we're suffering, but we can find a place, we can do something that steadies us.
In recent work, Robin Carhart Harris has expanded on this idea, proposing a construct called canalization as a general factor of psychopathology. The idea is that the brain can be modeled as a kind of landscape, and learning as the tracing of grooves within that landscape. The steepness and depth of the grooves corresponds to precision weighting, the confidence we have in particular strategies or beliefs. Over time, as we repeat these patterns, the grooves become deeper and easier for the brain to repeat. But trauma can also cause these grooves to deepen defensively, making them difficult and frightening to escape even after they've outlived their utility.
In psychopathology, that could take many forms. It could be falling into a depression, a kind of hibernation from the scary, uncertain world. In eating disorder, we're starting to control our caloric intake because at least we can control something.
The effect of psychedelics has been compared to a fresh snowfall, flattening the landscape and allowing new pathways to be laid down.
Understanding psychopathology in this way has also started to shed light on the positive end of the spectrum. In a paper titled The Predictive Dynamics of Happiness and Well-Being, philosopher Mark Miller argues that the goodness or badness of our emotions depends on the rate at which we're reducing prediction errors. Paradoxically, happiness isn't about driving error to zero, but about confronting the unknown voluntarily and finding new errors to predict away.
Pathology is about installing suboptimal beliefs that somehow get insulated because of these nasty feedback cycles. And so what's going to be central to our long-term well-being are all those skills and abilities and ways that we have of locating those suboptimal belief packets and then challenging them in ways that they start updating again, that they become updatable rather than embedding themselves and becoming stickier. We want to find ways of making them more fluid.
The problem is that, as we learned in the 1960s, freedom can't just be a matter of sustaining a psychedelic state. And as seekers like Ram Dass discovered, psychedelics alone may not be enough.
The question is, can drugs be used as a vehicle to enlightenment? I don't think there is much doubt about it that at least psychedelic chemicals, not all drugs, but psychedelic chemicals, have a capacity to cut through places where you are attached and clinging, to set them aside and show you a possibility. The problem is that they don't allow you to become the possibility, they only show you the possibility. And then after a few hours, you lose the view of the possibility and you have it only as a memory.
psychedelic experiences can provide a genuine taste of the freedom beyond the confines of the ego. But that freedom is by its very nature fleeting, because it relies on dramatic changes to the contents of experience. When the trip ends, the ego reasserts itself, however improved it may seem to be.
The major Eastern idea is what is generally known as reincarnation, of going through life after life after life in an endless series, a process that is represented in this Japanese print of the Wheel of Life. The point that has to be remembered is that you can never stop anywhere. You may ascend to heaven, but what goes up must eventually come down. You may descend to hell, but what goes down must eventually come up. And so one goes on and on, moving through these various worlds until, in Buddhist ideas, you become sufficiently awakened to become a Buddha, one who is released from the wheel.
The way out of this cycle has been understood for millennia, not through science, but through introspection. And it begins by asking what remains when the self we thought we were dissolves.
One can ask the question, who or what is having this experience? Who or what is having this experience? And if one does that, instead of finding a usual conventional self, we can open up to the empty nature of awareness itself.
Awareness forms the ground of every experience, both ordinary and psychedelic. And it turns out that awareness, even an ordinary experience, is already free of the boundaries we'd otherwise seek to escape.
As you extricate yourself from these attachments, it's as if you are going into the space or the ground that lies behind the figures, which are thoughts, the thoughts being the definition of who I am and how the universe is, ego structure, models. You see models as merely models, and you start to rest in your awareness that lies behind the models. In that awareness, that spaciousness around the forms is the equanimity.
The intrinsic freedom of awareness is obscured by our habit of ceaseless identification with thought. And it's this habit that the practice of meditation can help one to break. By learning to recognize thoughts as mere appearances in consciousness, we can unravel the dream of a separate and isolated self.
You have become experience. You've transcended dualism, the separation between subject and object.
The key insight is that we don't need to identify with thoughts or emotion as they arise, but instead we can turn with great interest to investigate the present moment, and we can cultivate gratitude for the astonishing mystery in which we find ourselves.
Neither meditation nor psychedelics is a substitute for scientific inquiry, but both can help reveal in a visceral way what science increasingly suggests. The fact that the selves and worlds of our experience are controlled hallucinations, and can therefore be perceived in a radically different way.
When we become aware of the fact that we are constructing our experience, then the relationship with all the phenomena can start to change.
The less we conflate our constructions of reality with reality itself, the more willing we are to let go of them. And the easier it is to see through those constructions, to the freedom that lies behind them.
In meditation, you can have a no-self experience, and you can actually walk around in a no-self experience, and it can be a rather ordinary experience, ordinary consciousness. No fireworks, no distortions or anything like that.
Meditation can allow one to access the freedom of the mystical experience in the very midst of ordinary awareness. Indeed, the mystical experience is this ordinary awareness. Our job is to wake up to this fact.